We're starting to look forward to 2025, have been for a while, but now we're going to get serious about it. Phil Miller at the Star Tribune had an article on all the players and what their futures in 2025 look like. So Dave and I are going to do the same. This is Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello again, and welcome back to Locked On Twins. I'm your host, Brandon Warren, and you can unfollow me on the tweets at Brandon_WARNE. Thank you for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on the YouTube, because, of course, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. I am joined, as I always am, by Mr. Dave Brown, a 25-ish year vet of baseball writing, been in the BBWAA for over a decade, and voted for Joe Mauer for the Hall of Fame this last year. Mr. Dave, how are we doing?
We're doing great. I've just started the Hall of Fame process again, the voting research process. So it's I'm in the weeds.
When will that be in your hands, that ballot?
That's a great question that I don't remember the answer to. I want to say, I was late in getting a ballot last year, so I got it later than most of the people did. So I want to say it'll be like right after the World Series ends. Let's just go with that.
Yeah, well, and I think we're planning to do an episode on what to watch for in the World Series, which, if I'm not mistaken, we're 20-some-odd hours away from it opening up. So going to be a spirited back and forth, a jovial back and forth between two of the most storied franchises in MLB history, but that's neither here nor there. Right now, we're going to talk today about an article that Phil Miller wrote for the Minnesota Star Tribune. Got to catch myself on that. Published on, what day is today? Today's Thursday, so Wednesday. It was posted, called After Dust Settles on 2024 Season, a player-by-player look at the roster for next year. Now, I will lean somewhat on Phil's writing just for kind of like reference, but the opinions that you and I come up with are both going to be of our own. Now, before we get into that, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. And yeah, use code LOCKEDONMLB again for $20 off your first purchase on Gametime, the sponsor for the top sponsor for today's show. So, Dave, we had, it was kind of on my mind to be doing an episode or a series like this. We just finished our autopsy series, a 5-parter, 5-piece series. So if people want to go back and check that out, I would highly recommend it. But, I was digging through the clips the Twins send out every single day, and it's just kind of a collection of everything written about the team from across the local and national perspectives. And I came across Phil Miller's piece, and I love Phil, not Phil, the Will Forte character, Last Man on Earth from a few years ago on television. But you ever watch that show?
I didn't. I certainly meant to, but I never did.
Well, if you go back and watch it, they do a little thing at the beginning where it's like the future 2020 after the virus hits, and you're like, whoa, that's
how did they know? Did they know?
Right, because I think it came out in like 2015. So that alone is it's a little weird. But anyway, Phil Miller, tremendous guy who writes for the Star Tribune, and one of my all-time favorite people to work around with, because I worked at the Strib with him for a little bit. He did this nice, perfectly organized, alphabetically list of players who were on the roster this year and what he expects to happen to them next season, whether it's will they make it through the offseason on the roster? Are they a free agent? Are they a fit for the Twins next year? So on and so forth. And so, honestly, I'm feeling like we'll probably just start at the top and roll through these and get as many as we can in an episode and go from there.
Okay. Sounds good. Let's do it.
Jorge Alcala and Phil has their age in the post. So 29 for Alcala. I want to check just for a point of reference if he's talking about their age right now or next season. So Alcala is 29. He turned 29 in July. So I'm assuming this is their age as of right now. And so Alcala, he says, frustrates the Twins so much that he was demoted to St. Paul in April with a 0.00 ERA. And what felt like a breakthrough year, a 1.63 ERA through July with 1 homer, was undone by an awful final 2 months, a 6.41 with 7 home runs. Twins hold a $1.5 million option or a $55,000 buyout. And the outlook is still cheap, but who will shake their heads in disbelief more often, opposite hitters or his coaches? Now, if you look at like there were a lot of people that were just absolutely beside themselves when the Twins were sending Alcala back late in the season. And if you look at his season numbers, 3.24 ERA, 3.03 xERA, the FIP and the xFIP are bumped over 4. Highest velo of his career at 98.0, but strikeout per inning, 3.0 walks, 3.1 walks per 9, 1.23 homers. Like, this is another instance of that theory that I have where you don't really see the real player here. You have a guy who was the top version of himself and then the worst version of himself. And what the results tell you is, hey, he was a 3-something ERA pitcher when he never really felt like that kind of guy.
Well, Alcala was definitely the kind of guy who was like a no ERA guy or a 7 ERA guy.
Right.
And that adds up to 3.24. I think maybe a little bit of there's some inside information here that I don't think we're privy to. There's because he was sent down earlier in the season too. I thought it was at the time. I thought it was because they were hurting for innings and he had pitched a game or two with a couple of back-to-back innings, and then they needed another guy. And so without knowing exactly what it is that's frustrating about him other than results, I mean, yeah, it's frustrating to go out there and all of a sudden just start giving up home runs, obviously so. But if there's something else about the day-to-day or work ethic or attitude or, that we don't know, there's something there is definitely something missing with Alcala. Yeah. And but his overall stats, his StatCast stats and his results, to me, this could be a guy that you trade and you get something for. If he's a headache, if he's not a good student, if their problems with Alcala are something like that, maybe you shuffle the deck here. And I'm not saying that they wouldn't then need to bring in someone else's Alcala, but maybe you move him for something else that you need and get a different body in. That might be kind of how I feel about all their left-handed hitting outfielders. Maybe you move a couple of them, one or two, and get something else that you need rather than having a plurality of them.
I think at his age too, he's not super young. He's only signed through next year. Although, you know what, I should double check that because sometimes guys get signed to deals that lock up years, Anyway, he's free agent eligible after 2026. So that deal didn't lock them up through his control just for 2 years, it looks like, based on what Fangraphs and I believe Cott's contracts powers that. No, wait, maybe I'm mistaken. Is Cott still on Fangraphs? I can't remember.
That I'm not sure about.
Okay, well,
I do know. Yeah, he had
some control left beyond next year. It's just that his value is explicitly known. He's not going to arbitration this offseason.
I also think, again, without this little bit of information that I think that's missing, if you do look at his stats just from month to month, he had a bad August. The rest of his season, to a month was really good. And I think we are so we scrutinize so much. We're so into these 1-inning relievers that when something goes wrong, we panic. And even, not just fans or media, but the team. And they're like, oh no, Alco's off. We need to send him down to the minors or get a different guy in there. And it's like, these guys are not robots. They're going to have bumps in the road. Not everybody is going to be perfect all season. So I think if you take out his August, which was horrendous, 731 slugging allowed, he had a great season and is really valuable. That said, if he's, what we used to call a head case, then move it. But don't do this again next year. Where you send him down to the minor leagues. That can't be good for a guy's psyche. I don't know. That wouldn't be good for mine if I was throwing 100 miles an hour and getting guys out the way that I can if I'm Jorge Alcala. I don't like going down to the minors that much. It's gonna hurt me emotionally. It is. I'm a human being. So let's not do that again.
Wasting bullets at that velo too.
Absolutely.
Hey, so quickly before we go to break, what kind of player would you need to get back for a trade, knowing what the Twins have, knowing what the Twins need, and knowing what the Twins may or may not be willing to do otherwise? Where do you stand as far as if they get an offer like this, they should move Alcala?
If they got an offer for another kind of reliever who gave maybe somebody with a higher ceiling and a lower floor, who was similarly aged, who has similar wear and tear on the arm. I think
just a couple of change of scenery, guys.
Yes. I would first look at change of scenery. And it's harder to – Alcala's maybe more of a guy that you build a trade package with, both going and coming. So it's kind of hard to answer that question. But if you're talking about a one-for-one.
Like a Justin Topa for the Mariners a year ago.
Yes, but just make sure that the guy has a knee that will not give out on a play at the plate and then ruin his season.
Yeah, well, I didn't know if you were talking about Polanco, if you were talking about Topa, or if you were talking about Sergio Romo, who seemed to have a trick knee that year he was with the Twins as well. That was also interesting. But hey, let's do this. Let's take our first break. When we come back, we have a reliever who has the first or second worst last name for any reliever in Twins history. And I don't know, we'll see how far else we get as we go alphabetically through the Twins roster and their future outlook for 2025. And we love Gametime. Gametime is the app, or if you must use the internet to get there, gametime.co. Anytime you want to go to a live event, Gametime is the place to go, whether it's a concert, comedy show, or, of course, a sporting event. Check it out, and you thumb through there. It'll show you all the different events, whether you want to go to a Vikings game or if you want to go to a Timberwolves game. The Lynx are done now, Twins are done now, but we can look forward to those again once the weather starts to get a little bit warmer. But you can thumb through the marketplace that you are in, for instance, Minneapolis, St. Paul for me. And there are so many things going on that even I can't keep up with. The Gametime keeps in a chronological list. So if you've got nothing to do on a Friday and you're thinking, hey, I want to go out and do something, Gametime, go check it out. They'll have it listed for you. And the all-in pricing, I can't recommend enough. Click that, tabulate that on, and it will give you the price you will pay at the end of the transaction rather than the bait and switch that other places have where it's I think I'm paying $20 for tickets, and then it's $38 when you get to the end, and you're already that far down the line. You're going to get mad and not want to cancel the transaction, and it just saves you a whole lot of headaches. And, of course, too, I love the panoramic views. I know what the view is going to look like from my seat before I click the purchase button. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB, and they'll give you $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So, Dave, the next guy up on the list is Scott Blewett, and don't know if Blewett or Balfour, Grant Balfour is a worse moniker / last name for a pitcher. There's also a kicker named Blewett. I don't think he's in the NFL anymore, but I think his name was Chris Blewett. I think he kicked for the Colorado Buffaloes back in the day. But Blewett, pretty rough last name. And if I was to have any reason not to have him back on the team next year, because his numbers were decent enough, it's just the hacky jokes every time he pitches.
Well, hacky jokes are the best kind, I feel.
Yeah.
He's also got the secret codes to the Royals. So in case we got to ask him any questions about what's going on in Kansas City, Scott Blewett, he knows what the code to the bullpen was. He spent 2 seasons with the Royals, 2 parts of 2 seasons, actually about 8 innings. So it's not really worth it, is it? But he did well. It's not a guy, and it's not because of his last name, but you didn't really expect a lot out of Scott Blewett games. He didn't pitch a lot in high leverage. There were a couple of moments where Rocco used him in necessity there, but he did pretty well. And, his secondary numbers probably don't support a 1.77 ERA, but he showed to be at least, and he could go for more than one inning. Rocco wanted people to pitch 2 innings at a time. This was a guy that could do it. Blewett could do it. So he's a guy that he's still on the roster. You want him in spring training. Actually, you want him as depth. So this is a guy, unlike Alcala, where depending on his options, you kind of want to have him around to shuffle back and forth between here and AAA. So a valuable guy to have in that sense.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like this is a guy where it wouldn't be shocking at all to get that email where it says, hey, we've outrighted these guys, and he's on that list. They've had a few guys like that in recent years. I think Luke Farrell was one of them. He had a nice little run with the Twins there for a bit. They didn't bring back Matt Whistler. I think they non-tendered him rather than taking him to arbitration. It would not be shocking at all. Now, with that said, his numbers were good enough to be like, hey, give him a shot. But, 1.77 ERA, but the peripherals don't really back it up. Less than 8 strikeouts per 9, more than 3.5 walks per 9. Unusually high strand rate, not a big ground ball guy. Anyway, FIP 414, xFIP 414, FIP 400. Not that those are bad for a pitcher of any kind, but I feel like this is the kind of guy you outright and say, listen, same opportunity as last year. We'll sign you to a minor league deal. We'll give you an opt-out at the end of spring training so that if you're performing, you can go somewhere else. But we want you in that mix. That, to me, is kind of what I think the Blewett situation is.
No options, by the way, left for Blewett. I checked on Roster Resource Fangraphs, and he's at 0. So that's a guy that certainly would be subject to someone else claiming him or whatever if the Twins let him go. But Jorge Alcala, he's got 2 options left, so watch out. The Alcala roller coaster might be coming back in 2025.
And the art of player moves at this time of year is if everyone's subtracting, it's easier for you to get someone through waivers. You know what I mean? Again, you still would have to get him to agree to sign back with you. And I feel like the Twins have had some luck with that. Guys who have popped off the 40 and still come back. They've had the ability to make those guys hang around. They've made them comfortable in the system. So if Blewett were to be out,
one thing we got to look at. Where's Thad Levine working? Is Scott Blewett a Thad Levine guy? And is Thad Levine's new team, if he's dying for a right-handed reliever, Scott Blewett might be on his radar. I don't know. I'm a little tongue-in-cheek on that. But also, if you look at how the postseason has gone with the Dodgers in the World Series, out of necessity, they've done a lot of bullpen games. And I think that's only going to make it worse for those of us who loathe, the 14-man bullpens or whatever it seems like teams are doing these days. And that makes that does increase Scott Blewett's or people like Scott Blewett, his value. It also maybe puts them at greater risk for overuse and misuse and that kind of thing. So it's possible that people like him will be more valuable and thus subject to changing teams in the offseason because they don't have any options left.
All right, very quickly, Caleb Boushley is the next one. He's 31, led the Saints in innings pitched, only hits 90 on the fastball, 37 fastballs and sinkers in his 4 innings for the Twins with 0 swings and misses, Phil Miller notes. So Twins could tinker with his pitch mix, but will likely move on, he says. And Boushley to me is every year they bring in like 7-8 guys who either have a little bit of big league experience or like got to AAA and were close. And some years those guys break through, some years they don't. Drew Rucinski is the one I go back to a lot because he was on my podcast too. So, but I always feel like they're trying to get creative. Nick Turley was another one. I don't know if you remember Nick Turley, Dave.
I do remember Nick Turley, or the idea of Nick Turley, yes.
Yes, the numbers were just incredible for him in the minor leagues. And it didn't work out in the major leagues, in the bigs for him with the Twins. But I always felt like that Cleveland bit that's in Derek Falvey has him looking for, the next, whether it's Corey Kluber, or, because a lot of these guys came over in quiet little trades,
Right.
Kluber comes to mind, even Clevenger, all of the guys that were from that era seem to have come over either in a trade or a quiet little free agent signing. So I think the Twins are going to be very active in that marketplace. That's where Boushley came from. That's where Boushley will go again. Also, I think we should just note that it's kind of funny that it's spelled Boushley and pronounced Bosley.
It's a little too close to Bush League for that's not a moniker I would really want to handle or hand to anybody unless I didn't like them.
It reminds me of the episode of The Office where they have the Dundies and Phyllis wins the busiest beaver. And she goes, "Why does this say the bushiest beaver?" And it's like the most hysterical, it's like, oh, the old lady at the office is, she got a questionable trophy that sounds, inherently sexual in nature. And
The Office, another show that I've meant to watch, but didn't really very much. Possibly 9-8 record in 2023, a 9-6 record in 2024, posting ERAs of 5.11 and 5.23 at AAA. So,
he's going to be that AAA depth guy. Maybe the second coming of who was that former Cleveland guy they brought in that pitched a bunch of innings at AAA this year? Adam.
It's not. No, I don't.
I'm just going to bring it up because it's going to bother me. Plutko.
Oh, Plutko is.
Yeah, he did.
Plutko sounds like first baseman.
Sounds like a game you play on The Price is Right. Hey, let's take care. After you explain to me that you have not watched The Office, I think we need a quick break here to recollect, and then
sorry, I'm not part of the club.
Come down the home stretch here. NFL fans, you can get your season started with a big return on FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. That's right. That's the FanDuel app. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. By the way, Vikings, Rams, if you're listening to this when it comes out, which is Thursday, the Vikings are going to be on the road against the Rams. It's a 2.5-point spread. Vikings favored, -142 on the money line, and over-under is 48.5. Vikings 104 on the total. So Vikings favored, but looking like may not be a crazy high-scoring game. Hopefully the Vikings hold serve as the team with the vastly better record. But again, you can get started on FanDuel with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Dave, we're coming down the home stretch here, and I think we can get through two more guys. Matt Canterino, 26. Twins. Phil says this in a funny way. Twins officials so optimistic when he pitched well in spring training, make sad faces when you mention him. Tommy John surgery derailed one season, shoulder pain another, and now he hasn't pitched in a game since July 2022. Now he'll turn 27 in the spring, and honestly, someone would probably give him a chance. This might be one where you tinker with his 40-man status around the Rule 5 draft so that he can't get Rule 5'd away from you, because Rule 5 is tricky with a guy who gets hurt a lot and you can have him on the IL. And, Nick Birdie comes to mind. But I feel like his 40-man spot has to be tenuous just because you can't keep giving a 40-man spot to a guy, no matter how talented, when he just hasn't pitched for you. Like, who's going to give him a shot better than you will?
There are a number of players around the league who, I found this year, pitchers usually, who kind of had breakthrough seasons. And, hey, didn't they used to be with the Twins like 4 years ago? And people hem and haw about, good trade Falvey, and we make fun of that all the time. Canterino seems like one of these guys that's going to happen, that he'll get a clean bill of health-ish someday with some other team, maybe as soon as this year or next year. And we'll go, well, why didn't that work out with the Twins? Well, because he wasn't healthy. And sometimes time heals the wounds that otherwise don't get healed. So that has, his career has that written all over it, in my opinion, that we'll see that happen with Matt Canterino at some point.
Was Ian Hamilton one of those guys that you realized at some point was a Twin?
I did not realize that until this year, actually, until I was looking at his career for some other reason. I remember him with the White Sox, I think.
Pretty sure he was traded for Sandy Leon. When the Twins were in desperate need of a backup catcher, they traded Leon to Cleveland. Or not, let's start over. Traded Hamilton to Cleveland, not Clamilton to Heveland, not Leon to Clamilton. Hamilton to Cleveland for Leon.
As much of a mouthful as that is, good job getting through it.
So I think Canterino's best opportunity is here, and if he sees it that way, bully for him, bully for the Twins. But it's hard for me to imagine him starting next year on the 40-man roster unless he's been re-added because he's healthy, because the stuff is just it is tremendous. It's just we haven't seen enough of it.
This could be a guy, too, for the Twins, if he stays with the Twins, that you put in the bullpen. Because he's got it's with coming off elbow surgery and shoulder pain, this is a guy you're going to have to limit his exposure and how much he pitches and all that. So, and that there's always an opening in the bullpen. There's always money in the banana stand.
Yep, that's exactly.
Hey, there's a show I watched, Arrested Development.
No, you did good.
Are we friends again?
Sure, that's fine. Diego Castillo next on the list. He's 30. I put Diego, A Castillo because we don't know his middle initial. We know that the infielder, Diego Castillo, who was also a Twin this year and played in the major leagues very briefly, his middle initial is A, but I kept trying to find this guy's middle initial. Not out there. 97 with his fastball, lots of walks, 25 in 37 innings at St. Paul. Big dude, big, strong, strapping lad. I think we'll see him land somewhere on a minor league deal and, a team that's desperately needing relief help and is willing to have him be like their 13th or 14th option out there. Like, I don't see him breaking camp with anybody necessarily, but anytime a guy throws that hard, you're one tweak of command away from, closing for a 78 win team in September because, that's just kind of how the game goes.
Not to invite a lawsuit, but one of the many guys who've gone through the Rays system mysteriously and come out worse for wear as a result as far as their longevity goes. You connect your own dots there.
Yeah. Let's get through one more here. Anthony DeSclafani, age 34, and career stats as a Twin, Phil Miller says, 1 arm surgery. So slightly less experience than Homer Bailey, slightly more experience than, let's say, Jesse Chavez, who was rumored to be signed but not signed by the Twins last offseason. Third highest paid player. Most of his quote-unquote teammates won't recognize him. Has not been good since 2021. But Phil says someone will risk a few $1 million for a look. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It's going to be hey, we'll give you $3 million and then, some incentives for, for innings pitched or whatever, starts, whatever. I could see him getting $2.5, $3 million and then maybe incentives up to 8 or 10. But honestly, hard for me to see him making anything more than just a few mil as a swingman type, if that's what he's healthy enough to do.
34 years old now. That's getting old for pitchers with arm surgeries. I'd like to think for his sake that sort of in an old Canterino kind of way that he'll be able to make one of those miracle comebacks at the very end, maybe at the end of this season, maybe when he turns 35, and then help a team down the stretch. And it'll be worth a few good starts and a few goodwill points at the end. I can't see the Twins being that interested at this point. They need a little bit more of a sure thing, especially when it comes to spending millions of dollars, no matter who owns the team at this point. That's not a good bet for me.
As an NRI, maybe. But yeah, as a guaranteed contract, he would have to wait quite a while. You know what? Let's call this an episode when we reconvene next.
It's over.
When we reconvene, Randy Dobnak will be our first go round. We got a few other guys who are semi-interesting, and then we get into some of the bigger names as we move down the alphabet. But for now, he's Dave Brown. I'm Brandon Warren. We're saying thank you so much. By the way, make sure you check out. Thanks for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. But for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB with Sully. He is Paul Sullivan. We call him Sully. We got a good vibe with him, and he has it covered every single day. So you can find Locked On MLB where you can find Locked On Twins, which is YouTube or wherever you find your podcasts. But again, he's Dave Brown. I'm Brandon Warren saying thank you so much for hanging out with us on Locked On Twins. And we'll see ya tomorrow
night.
Tomorrow night. Or later today.
Alexei?
See ya!